It's really unhealthy. As soon as you open the door, the smell is there.
How would you describe the smell?
Like rotten eggs.
On this week's ClimateCast, I'm in the town of Silverdale in Staffordshire. Population 7,500. For something the town has been known for years, and it's the bad smell. Recently, complaints have bounced up again. The stink that blows through the air here is coming off a landfill site in an old quarry, right next to part of the town. It's releasing hydrogen sulphide, which can be created when waste decomposes, and the smell is rotten. I'm right beside Wally's quarry landfill site now. There's just a chain link fence here between me and the pile of old waste itself, and yeah, it does smell. It's funny, it comes in wafts as you walk along. You feel like you've encountered an invisible cloud of it, or it comes on a gust of wind, and it is that bad egg smell that you might remember from your chemistry class, or maybe when you've encountered a bad egg. It is hydrogen sulphide, and I've been on a few landfill sites before, and they often smell, but they don't usually smell like this. And the thing about this place is that it's so close to where people live and work. On the other side of me is a shop and a cafe. It's within 50 metres of where I'm standing. There are houses another couple of hundred metres behind that, and some new houses being built even closer on the other side. It is very much a kind of urban periphery landfill site. It would be pretty unpleasant to have this as a regular accompaniment to your life. And recently, there's been a big spike in reports of the smell, and now locals and their representatives have lost patience, and they're calling for this place to be closed. The operators wouldn't give us an interview. It gathered opposite the gate are a bunch of people who come here regularly to protest with their Stop the Stink banners. Let's have a word, see what they're here.
My name's Sarah Owen, local resident from Silverdale. It's literally less than half a mile away.
I'm Simo, same again, local resident.
For you, what's it like where you live and where you work?
It's horrendous. I can't get away from it. I could be at home and I'm getting gassed 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm having to put wax melts on, air fresheners, purifiers, you name it, just to try and clear the gas out of my house. And I go to work and it's the exact same thing.
Work near here as well?
Yeah, I work in Newcastle Town Centre.
And Newcastle Town Centre, that's not immediately next to here, is
No.
it? So the smell is spreading. How
It is.
far would that have been?
It's just short of 2 miles.
And what about you, sir? What's it like where you live?
Disgusting. I fear more for the children. I do. They should have had it shut some time ago. It's just an horrible smell for everyone. They wouldn't have this in London, so why should we put up with it?
Are there some days when it's worse than others?
And weekends are just absolutely horrendous, and it's to the point where you just want to leave because you're getting ill with major headaches, sore eyes, sore throats, bad chests.
Do you really feel it's making you ill?
Yes, I've ended up on inhalers, and I've never had inhalers before.
I suffer from epilepsy, and one of the triggers, lack of sleep. Well, we gain all that all the time, so I'm fitting more now than I used to. So it's not fair.
My baby is 16. He's taller than me, but since we've moved into the area, his asthma, which was only affecting him when he exercised, has become really out of hand. We've had to buy purifiers for in the house. I get really poorly much more often than I did when I lived 7 miles away.
If you're so worried about your health and your kids' health, why don't you just move away?
I can't afford to move away at the moment.
Would anybody buy your house?
I don't feel as though I could misrepresent my home to another family. I don't think I could lie to them and put them at risk.
It's clear that the people here believe the smell is actually making them ill, both physically and mentally, particularly those suffering from respiratory conditions like asthma or bronchitis. So I'm here at the local doctor's surgery, Silverdale Village Surgery, to see what the health professionals think.
Could I have the date of birth, please?
27th, the 10th, 66.
Thank you. And you said a half-hour appointment, is that right, with the nurse?
And in their village surgery, I find Dr. Paul Scott, who's been a GP here for approaching 30 years. Dr. Scott, what are your patients telling you about the effect of the smell, and what are you noticing about the effect of the smell here?
We experience it when we're working in our practices, both one in Silverdale and one in the centre of Newcastle. It was worse back in 2020, 2021, 22, when it really kicked off. It's calmed down when there seems to be perhaps better weather, but it never completely goes away.
And just on that, what's it like?
When you come into work on a Monday morning or any morning after a night when it's been bad, it kind of stays in the building. It hits you.
Can it sometimes be here in your consultation room?
Yeah. And often through the spring, summer, autumn, I have my window open. And of course, the other way we notice it is our own patients who are here 24/7, and they will bring it up in consultations depending on what they've come with. There's very rarely a week or two that goes by where it isn't raised, but it's almost sunk into the background noise and acceptance, which is really sad because it isn't resolved.
Is it making people ill here?
Yes, but to our knowledge, that's mainly been on the quality of life. So physically, and certainly when it first kicked off, we had to deal and adjust with people with asthma, with their inhalers, with chronic bronchitis, with all of their inhalers, anyone with sinus problems, hay fever type problems, all of that.
You know, though, that correlation isn't necessarily causation, and people can associate things, and it's not necessarily one contributing to the other.
True, but it wasn't a problem before. And it wasn't a problem for the previous 25 years that I've been here.
And does it fit with what people say can exacerbate these conditions if you have hydrogen sulphide?
I guess the biggest reason it does seem to fit is because of the sheer volume of patients reporting. And these are people who had previous stable conditions, increase their treatments to offset that. In a way, it's kind of hard built into people's treatments now. What is harder and in a way more difficult to deal with is the chronic quality of life, mental health aspects.
Well, let's talk about that. What is the impact on your psychology if you're very frequently being bothered by a horrible smell?
This has affected not just houses, but schools and whole communities, even businesses. Patients have a certain significant number have come with is having a knock-on effect to make them depressed. The biggest trigger seems to have been the disruption in sleep. What they tell us is that they feel the symptoms worse on certain nights, and then it wakes them up. They close their windows, they do whatever they can. They bought air purifiers, dehumidifiers, whatever. It still doesn't make a huge difference. It can be days and weeks of, depending exactly where you live on the clock around the landfill and where the wind's blowing and whether it's still wind or whether there's been rain. Many of our patients almost know weather is going to trigger a problem, and then unfortunately they're then almost waiting for their sleep to be disrupted.
Yeah, I was going to say, something doesn't have to be constant for it to be feared constantly, does it?
I think the randomness almost makes it worse. I think if it was fixed, you wouldn't like it, but you'd adjust to it more because it's coming and going, and that's a form of stress.
And the other thing, I guess, that would get to you is the sort of inescapability of it.
Yeah, they can't escape. You can't. I guess the definition of stress is being in a situation that's out of your control, and then you're stuck in an area with an intermittent thing that's affecting the quality of life. It's affecting tens of thousands of people. The population of Newcastle is over 100,000. The population of the conurbation is 500,000 with Stoke-on-Trent. The reporting of it goes right across those population areas. This is not a rural landfill. It's right smack in the middle of a big urban area. You would think at this stage, given it's not resolved, that there would be a permanent solution.
The operator of the landfill, Wally's Quarry, says that emissions from the site are below World Health Organization guidelines and that they've never been found legally liable for these health issues. The Environment Agency, which regulates the site, says emissions of hydrogen sulphide have been up lately. So, after years of complaints time and time again, why hasn't anything changed? On Monday, the government's waste minister visited Silverdale and came away saying no resident should have to put up with the horrendous smell from Wally's Quarry. And just this week, the council called on the Environment Agency to use its closure notice powers. The Shadow Environment Secretary, Steve Reed, has been to visit it in the last few weeks too.
It's shocking when you first get there. We drove there, we got out the car, and the stench immediately hits you in the face. I felt nauseous, if I'm really honest, standing outside that landfill site. But you've got an entire town there, Newcastle-under-Lyme, where people have had to put up with that stench for years.
And it's also stress and psychological effects, isn't it? Because there's this thing, it's a bit random, you don't know, it can wake you up in the middle of the night, but you can't escape from it. You can understand.
Well, it's just disgusting. You get outside in your garden, the kids want to go and play, and you have to come back inside again, close down all the windows, because the stench is so overwhelming. It is unbelievable, the extent of abandonment that people in that town feel, that the government, despite knowing what's going on, has done absolutely nothing to help.
Why do you think they have been abandoned, in your word?
Well, we've had over 10,000 complaints put in from people living in Newcastle-under-Lyme. 3 years ago, the Environment Agency issued an enforcement notice, but there was absolutely no follow-up on that. I've written to the Environment Secretary, Steve Barclay. He hasn't bothered to reply to my letter. I've been to visit and to smell the stench myself. He hasn't been there to visit. You cannot have government that just stands back when there's a problem that bad facing that many people and the government is doing nothing.
We did ask the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs for an interview to see why they're not sorting the issue. But instead they gave us a statement saying they have sympathy with the issues facing the community and are firmly committed to finding a long-term solution to the issue of the odour at Wally's Quarry as quickly as possible. Much easier said than done. The local MP for the area, Newcastle-under-Lyme, that's Aaron Bell, has started a petition to get the landfill shut down.
What we need now is a rapid plan to get a closure notice to stop the endless stream of lorries coming into the site and instead get soil on as quickly as possible and cap it off.
Have you got a rough idea of how much this could cost?
Yes, I mean it is rough and it is in the very long term because landfills operate for a long time after they're completed. So we're talking into the 2040s, but it could be in the order of 10 or 20 million pounds.
Are there questions for the Environment Agency here of how it got to this state?
There are a lot of questions for the Environment Agency to answer, and in the long run I think a public inquiry would be a way forward to look at this specific case but also wider lessons for the waste industry. There are other cases of similar but not quite the same scale that need to be investigated, and the Environment Agency have the powers, they have the resources. They've repeatedly said they don't have a resource issue with Wally's. What they seem to do is lack the courage to use the powers that they do have, and I'm urging them to do that now with a closure notice.
Another tricky layer to this is the solution isn't just as simple as closing the landfill site. Once waste stops going in, it still needs a cap to be put on top to stop the gases leaking out. As the waste decomposes, that needs to be maintained and monitored, which is supposed to be the responsibility of the landfill operator, in this case Wally's Quarry. They didn't want to do an interview, but they did tell us they've capped over a third of the landfill site and shielded the operation from neighbours, and they said that by the end of 2027 the entire site will be permanently capped and they'll begin work to sensitively landscape the site into a fantastic open space in the heart of the community. They've also said that they voluntarily invested a total of well over £2 million in all of this to ensure they achieve these goals as efficiently and effectively as possible. But remember, this stink hasn't just appeared overnight. It's been around for quite a few years, with peaks and troughs, and residents are tired of waiting for action. Here's Mick Fitzpatrick, one of the protesters.
We're annoyed now, but it's like our children, grandchildren, they've got to live with this. We're all breathing it in, day out. So we don't know what the long-term health effects are going to be for most of us.
Silverdale is an extraordinary place to visit. It has a population in the thousands, and sometimes this foul odour, which can make you gag, actually can spread further into the nearby towns of Newcastle-under-Lyme and even Stoke-on-Trent, with hundreds of thousands of residents. How has it been allowed to get like this? There are a lot of questions here for the Environment Agency and, of course, for the operators, Wally's Quarry Limited. But now the question is, how actually can we stop this? Whichever way you put it, there is no doubt that thousands of people should not have to live with this stench. That's it for this week's ClimateCast, produced by Mickey Carroll and Emma Ray Woodhouse.